Hey everyone, my name is Brooke Shoemaker and I'm an occupational therapy student. And my topic for this week was autism identity. So the article I chose is from the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders, and it's titled, I'm Proud to Be a Little Different, The Effects of Autistic Individuals' Perceptions of Autism and Autism Social Identity on Their Collective Self-Esteem. And the authors of this article are Cooper, Russell, and Smith, and it was published online June 30th, 2020. So, a little background information. The purpose of this study was to identify the main attributes that individuals with autism view as negative or positive, and these factors were thought to impact their identity and well being. So, the authors just wanted to determine the main factors to see if there was any type of pattern related to their self esteem and their personal views of their own identity. And then I found this definition from Frontiers in Psychology journal, and it says personal autistic identity would encompass an individual's own specific interests and values as an autistic person, which they perceive to contribute to their uniqueness and individuality. So this examples of this is characteristics of I and me. So the ways in which they would describe themselves or their struggles or their positive opinions of themselves as well. So the research design of this study is mixed methods, and it has two different data sets that they combine in the end to get overall results as well. So study one data set uses online surveys, and the goal of these was to determine social identification factors, self-esteem, and personal attributes. And the data set from study number 2 was used to rate autism attributes and discuss the ratings in focus groups to get more information. So, like I have at the bottom right here, the data gathered through study number 2 was discussed in these focus groups, and that was ultimately used to elaborate on the findings of study number 1. And the evidence level of this study is level number 4, and this was discussed in the evidence-based practice and the modules. Okay, so the methodology, the participants from study number 1. So this study, the participants were recruited from online forums and the National Autistic Society research. And then inclusion criteria: individuals diagnosed or self-identifying with Asperger's syndrome, high-functioning autism, autism, atypical autism, or PDD were included in this study, and individuals who were under the age of 16 were excluded from study number 1. And then over here I have some averages and totals. So the total number of participants for study number 1 was 140, and the majority of them were white and female, and 75% of the participants had a formal diagnosis. So for this study in particular, they could either be self-identifying with one of the following under inclusion criteria or formally diagnosed. They did not have to be formally diagnosed to participate in this section of the study. So from study number 1, data collection, there were 3 main surveys used. The first one was the Autism Social Identification Measure, and this contained 14 items, and they were scored on a 7-point scale, so 1 being strongly disagree and 7 being strongly agree. And there were 2 dimensions, self-investment and self-definition. And the second data collection method was the collective self-esteem measure, and this was also ranked using a 7-point scale from the same scale described above, and this one contained 8 items. And the purpose of this data collection measure was to determine the extent of which being in a group with similar individuals could positively contribute to self-esteem. And the last one is the autism attributes measure. And in this one, participants were just asked to list up to 5 words to describe autism in themselves. And these responses were later grouped into categories, which we'll discuss later on. So the first set of data analysis, I have a little chart over here that goes along with it, but survey data and responses were coded into themes of words or phrases that were similar. So over here you can see the attribute listed on the left, And then on the far right, the example words and phrases within this attribute. So that just shows how they grouped them and like what words would go with what attribute as a group. And the grouping was validated by another researcher, and the top 10 were recorded in a table. So results from study 1, survey responses showed a significant agreement on the top 8 reported attributes, and these top 8 include social skill difficulties, loneliness, sensory issues, emotional difficulties, difference, cognitive differences, anxiety, and communication issues. And that was seen in the chart before this as well. Okay, so moving on to study number 2. These participants were recruited through a university transition program for students and a community-based program. The inclusion criteria is the same: individuals diagnosed or self-identifying with the following. Exclusion criteria, or individuals who participated in the first half of the study. So some averages and totals. The total participants for study number 2, there were 15, and then they were split into 4 focus groups. And there were 2 focus groups consisting of students from the university transition program, which the average age was 18.67. And then the other 2 focus groups were made up of community participants, and the average age was about 35.5. Data collection for study 2. 60-minute focus groups were conducted with 1 facilitator per group, and they instructed the participants to rate attributes presented to them with how negatively or positively they thought of them. And these attributes were the ones that were on that table from study number 1. So this group was able to share their rating on the scale of -5 to +5, and then they discussed their own viewpoints for each item. And the purpose of this component of the focus group sessions was just to add description to the quantitative set of data from study number 1. Okay, and then data analysis from study number 2. So the focus group discussions were recorded and then transcribed to determine themes. A thematic analysis was used to determine specific experiences of individuals with autism using the autism attributes from study number 1. And then within samples, t-test was used to determine the overall mean to determine any significance. And that chart is on this PowerPoint right there. Those are the average ratings. Okay, results from study number 2. 4 main themes were identified in the data analysis. The 4 themes were challenges due to autism, diversity and adaptation, navigating difference, and positive autism identity. And then there's sub-themes listed next to those as well. And then some example quotes that were transcribed and then recorded from the participants in the focus groups. Okay, and finally, the researchers did an integrative analysis to determine the correlation and the relationship between the results from study 1 and study number 2. So results from a mediation analysis showed no significant effect of age on autism identification. There was significant effect of gender. And finally, there was a significant positive relationship between valence of autism attributes and autism social identification. So therefore, the results from the mediation analysis do support the hypothesis that individuals with autism who associated positive attributes with their diagnosis had improved and higher self-esteem. So overall, these participants had a stronger sense of identity regarding autism because of their positive association with the attributes. Appraisal. So the strengths of this article, the main strength is that the researchers used inductive approach, and this was used to ensure that the themes were solely data-driven and to eliminate some sort of bias. And then in the integrative analysis does increase the validity of the study because it combines the results from both components of the study. And the weaknesses, The focus group sample size was relatively small, so in the future, I think if they increase this, they would get a wider variety of results. And then the predetermined attributes for study number 2, it might have been different if the participants from study number 2 could have identified attributes on their own. It might have been similar based on the large response from study number 1, but that's just something to think about. And then the undiagnosed participants could have also had an effect on this as well. Clinical application. So for all of our future professions, it's really important we know early intervention. And at the end of this article, which I'm going to post below if anyone wants to read that as well, early intervention with young individuals is shown to contribute to developing a more positive identity. So if they're introduced to more positive traits and hearing more positive things about their diagnosis at a young age, it could be easier for them to associate their identity more positively in the future than negatively. And then it's important for us as future professionals to encourage our clients to participate in online or community groups. And then also, of course, it's important for us to understand the specific struggles and personal experiences associated with ASD from our clients. And this could overall lead to a stronger relationship between us and the client in the clinic. And this could lead to producing better results overall. And then here is my reference. Thank you.